Today on the Roundhouse, we're going behind the scenes of what it takes to put together a mainline steam excursion. All aboard!
In days past, the roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to the Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Ozarek, and this is episode number 138 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and the hobby. You name it, and we discuss it. Today, we're talking to Zac McGinnis, Excursion Manager for Norfolk and Western 611's trips out of Goshen, Virginia during 2023 on the Buckingham Branch Railroad. We're going to talk to him about all of the logistics involved in putting the trips together, how they had to assemble the station, the consist, and how they handled the challenges that came along the way, including a broken flexible stable. The Roundhouse Podcast is a Streamliner Media production. That's my company, where I use the power of digital storytelling, especially through video, to help you accomplish your goals through your business or organization. You can reach out to me at streamlinermedia.com. I want to thank the supporters of the Roundhouse Podcast on Patreon. You could go to patreon.com/theroundhouse for as little as $1 a month. You're going to support the show. And I want to thank the Mechanical Services Department of the Strasburg Railroad for sponsoring this episode. Learn more at mechanical.strasburgrailroad.com. Our guest today is the Excursion Manager for Norfolk and Western 611's trips out of Goshen for 2023. Please welcome to the Roundhouse, Mr. Zac McGinnis.
Thank you, Nick.
This has been quite a Herculean effort to put together. Best place to start, Larkin Parr asks, how did you guys decide, you know what, let's go to Buckingham Branch and run 611?
Well, that's a great question, and question we're asked a lot. And believe it or not, talks for this has been going on for years. We always thought the Buckingham would be a great place to run, being in the home state of Virginia, the 611, and also close to Roanoke, within an hour and a half drive. So it's, as things with steam excursions go, it just takes a lot of planning and logistics behind the scenes. And that goes all the way from seeing if the locomotive can fit there, talking with the railroad of what they can do, what their infrastructure can hold, and on our end, what we can do to make a successful operation. And like I said, it's been talked for years. And then this was basically a start from scratch operation. And we're really proud of what we did this year.
Part of that process of starting from scratch was the creation of Victoria Station. I was talking with some of your crew who said that just a few months before these excursions were starting, it was all forest. What all was required to make that a serviceable station?
Well, it's one of those things of kind of the stars aligning in our favor. When discussions were going on with the Buckingham, one of the things was, where could we store and service a 13-car train to pull excursions? And we realized quickly we couldn't do it in Stanton. There's just not the track space, the parking. So luckily, and like I said, the stars aligned, the president of the board at Virginia Museum of Transportation, Will Harris, owns property in Goshen. And his property is serviced by a Buckingham Branch lead that goes to Stella Jones Tie Plant. So Will came up with the idea and said, well, what if I build a station on my site in Goshen and put a switch in off the Buckingham's track, and we can store the train, we can make parking, we could service the train. and so that worked out for us. And I believe it was back in March is when Will started working on the property, and had it all finished by the time it was excursion time.
I mean, everything from being able to have all that gravel to create the road and the parking lot, all of the tents, all the facilities. It's clear just that it was a lot of resources to go in to be able to make even just that portion of it happen.
100%. And like you said, it was leveling off the land, making new roads. Will just put everything into it. And another board member, Gavin Miller, he deserves so much credit as well. He put so much into it as well, and now we have electric generators on site so we can have power. We have Wi-Fi on site, a public announcement system. We have running water on site, and our goal is, this, like I said, this was a start from scratch off your operation. You got to crawl before you walk, and so now we feel like we built a good basis, and now moving forward, if this is going to be an annual thing, we can build more and have more on site. And I know Will and Gavin, they want to do more. They've set the bar high, so I look for them to continue improving the site for our guests.
I'm really interested in exploring all of the logistics that goes into even just determining if the locomotive and how the locomotive can work on the line. One of the things that was explained to me during the trip, for example, is that there was a bridge which had to have a temporary speed restriction placed on it for the locomotive because there was such a tight clearance going over it between the locomotive and the girders. How does the engineering process go in terms of reviewing all of that information and making sure that the locomotive is compatible for such a route?
Well, that's one of the first things we look into on anywhere we would like to go with 611. 611 is, we joke around, it's the world's most restricted steam engine. It's a 484 wheel design, but it has a very rigid wheelbase. It's tall, it's wide, it's heavy. So our mechanical team, led by Scott Lindsay, our chief mechanical officer, they know that engine inside and out. And we have diagrams from the Norfolk and Western that we use as well, track charts for curvature, weight restrictions, things like that. And then we meet with the railroad to see if this is something we can do. And we looked at it all. We saw that between Waynesboro and Goshen, the engine would fit. We had a little concern on the bridge at Craigsville. We knew on paper it would fit. So when we brought the engine over, we actually stopped at the bridge and went back and forth 2 or 3 times to check the actual measurement. And I believe we had 5 inches of clearance on the fireman's side. So the Buckingham Track Department, along with our mechanical team, determined a 10-mile-an-hour slow order on that bridge, engine and tender, would suffice. And so that's what's happened with that. And it goes back to, we've had other opportunities come up with that looked good on paper of 611 going to other railroads, but the engine was just too big. Unfortunately, due to disclosures, can't disclose where those locations are. But that's the big thing is, it's not a model train like a lot of people think, where you can just put it on tracks and go wherever. We've looked into a lot of places, but just the size of the locomotive is a real deterrent on some things.
In collaborating with Buckingham Branch, as those conversations were evolving and becoming more and more serious, what were, from your understanding, their goals of what they wanted to accomplish? Obviously, you and your team are looking to have the educational component of introducing the locomotive to the public and the financial benefits of it helping to sustain the Virginia Museum of Transportation. What were their goals and what made it a good fit for what they were looking to accomplish?
I think a lot of it goes to just the willingness to showcase what a great operation they have. They had the scenery. The Shenandoah Valley was so beautiful, especially in the fall colors. They started their own excursion train out of Stanton. And as I understand, I can't speak for them, but as I understand, that's looking to grow as well. So I really think it just turned into such a great partnership. And they had the track, they had the scenery, we had the locomotive, and their management team from the top all the way down to their ground operations people were just so top notch to work with, and some of the best we've ever worked with since I've been involved. And I think it's just really forming a partnership, showcasing the history of historic steam railroading, as well as showcasing the beautiful Shenandoah Valley, the fall colors, and the beautiful Stanton area, Goshen area, and creating a great partnership.
It doesn't hurt as well that the trips had the diesel assistance for the return because there wasn't the ability to turn the locomotive around. So every time people are coming back to the station, they're seeing these beautifully clean Jeeps with the Buckingham Branch name on it. And I suppose that's also an opportunity to bring additional awareness to such a short line.
Yeah, again, I can't speak for the Buckingham or Virginia Scenic Railway, but I do think, and I personally believe, they took a lot of pride in this operation. And their locomotives looked spectacular, like you said. Their equipment, we used their power car, and we used a table car, the Augusta, which I believe was the first time it's been in revenue service since they've gotten that car. And just the inside of that car was beautiful, and the work their folks put in on this was just tremendous. And we can't thank him enough for all of that.
Perhaps you could clarify this a bit more, because I myself am a little hazy on it. Does the Buckingham Branch own the line, and then CSX and Amtrak are leasing it for the sake of their operations, or is it some other arrangement?
My understanding is the state of Virginia owns the line that we operated on, and I don't know the specifics of how far they own, or because I know they have an operation near Newport News as well, but I don't specifically know what area the state owns. But the Buckingham is the designated operator of that line for the state of Virginia. And then I believe Amtrak and CSX has trackage rights over the line.
So that means that as far as coordinating with Amtrak, that's just the Buckingham Branch dispatcher ensuring that everybody's schedules are aligning and doing the best to keep everybody moving.
Yes, that's correct. We were under dispatch from the Buckingham the whole time, and then they would coordinate the meets with Amtrak and then the CSX trains, and also the Virginia Scenic Rail excursion that ran out of Stanton. Each morning, we would have to coordinate with them as well to make sure they were out of the way in Stanton so we can come into the station.
Jason Smerciak asks, how much prepping and planning went into these trips with Norfolk Southern regarding the ferry moves to and from Roanoke?
Well, we have a great relationship with Norfolk Southern. They've been a great partner to work with. And really, it's, because of our great relationship with them, when we contact them, they'll ask where we're wanting to go, a time frame of when we're wanting to go, and pretty much it's just they approve it when it's good for them, and we go at their willingness. We operate with a diesel on the point for Norfolk Southern because of PTC. The locomotive's not equipped with that, and then also it helps us save fuel while we're going to different destinations with NS.
Ivan Herndon asks, what is the difference between working with Norfolk Southern versus Buckingham Branch Railroad, and what does it take to transfer the locomotive and the associated equipment between those two railroads at Waynesboro?
So working with both of them, and the bottom line is, they're all professional railroaders. And on our side, we have professional railroaders as well. and you got to run this as being the most professional as possible. So, like I said, we still have a great relationship with Norfolk Southern. The same with the Buckingham as well. And so when we leave out of Roanoke, we get to Waynesboro, and then we would come into the yard, and we were facing the right direction for the trips. So we would just come into the yard, the NS diesel would cut off, and then the Buckingham engines came down into the yard, attached to the rear, and pulled us up the connector track to the Buckingham line. And then we went west from Waynesboro to Goshen.
Bob Hughes asks, my questions deal directly with using Goshen as the headquarters for the excursions. How did you get 540 tons of coal to Goshen and all of that water?
Well, we didn't get it all at once. So the coal is ordered, I believe Scott orders it 50 tons at a time and would have it delivered weekly. So we, as you know, like I said, it's a new operation. We actually had to build a little facility to store our coal. You don't want to put it on the ground because then it can get mixed with dirt and rocks and other debris, things like that. So Will and them, they made a site for us to dump our coal, and it was delivered in dump truck. And like I said, I believe it was 50 tons a time. And then we had a telehandler with a scoop, and that's how we loaded the coal in the engine. As far as watering, the Goshen Volunteer Fire Department were so key in this operation. Anything we needed from them, they helped. But they had a fire hydrant that was probably 500, 600 feet away from the locomotive on the main road. And they let us use all their fire hose. We tapped into the fire hydrant, ran the hose through the woods and up to the locomotive. And the fire chief would show up every day, or whenever we needed the hydrant turned on, he would show up, never missed a day. So that's how we watered the locomotive as well. And then the fire department helped us. They would actually water the passenger cars for us during servicing to help us out. And then they would even, they staffed the train with safety personnel. They also helped us load and unload passengers on and off the excursion trains.
When we were coming back on the last trip of the season, and it was completely dark out because we just had daylight savings time happen, and they were on site with their giant floodlights, in addition to the ones that you already had hooked up to power, but they had additional ones on their trucks. And boy, it really lit up the scene tremendously. It's clear that they were really invested in making this happen.
They really were, and we can't thank them enough for everything they did. And the day before we left to go back to Roanoke, I believe it was Monday, November 6th, they brought their fire trucks over, and we parked the trucks on each side of the locomotive for some photos for them as well. So that was pretty cool.
On the topic of coal, it's something that we've seen discussed a lot lately in the Heritage Railway scene. Obviously, there's a lot of historical significance to 611 being a coal-fired engine and what that means. And to say nothing of the experience of it as well, there are, though, the challenges of being able to continue to source coal going forward. How, I'm sure it's difficult to put a timeline on it, but are there conversations within your team about the sustainability of continuing to be able to run with coal, where we see a number of engines being converted to oil from a sustainability standpoint?
There has been unofficial talks, just kind of chatter around the tool car, as, oh, what if? But, there has never been any serious talks whatsoever of converting the engine to oil at this time. If we were running, every day, or, even like the old program used to run 70 trips a year, it might be more beneficial to do that. But as of right now, with what we're operating, it just doesn't seem on our radar. Because also then you got to do the cost analysis of what we pay for coal and the disposal of the ash right now, delivery as well. But also, what would it cost to convert the engine to oil? You'd have to build an oil tank. You'd have to build the burner and everything. And then you'd have to do some extensive testing to see if it would be successful or not, because N&W never had anyone burning Class J's. So that would be chartering or going in uncharted waters. So there would be a lot of cost into converting the engine, and it would just be outweighing, what costs now for coal, what we're running compared to what it would be to engineer, design, test, and move forward on a conversion. But I can say right now there's no talks of converting the engine to oil. It's going to be a coal burner like the East End shops intended.
Good to know. And speaking of coal ash, Matthew Kemper asks, how did you guys plan for being able to handle the removal of that ash, given that there weren't otherwise designated facilities for it?
Yeah, that's out of my realm of expertise on that. But I do know they had when we would go out on trips, when we would come back, the ash would be cleaned up and disposed of appropriately. But yeah, that was out of my job title. So I don't 100% know the I guess the way they did it, or what equipment they used or anything like that. So I can't 100% answer that, but I do know they did dispose of it appropriately, and the ash was cleaned up when we would come in after each trip.
Going back to looking at all the pieces that needed to come together to be able to have this series of excursions happen, key element is being able to have that 13-car train. What was the process of piecing together the consist and getting the different cars from different sources and different contributors on that front?
So yeah, we had a very interesting consist this year, and we had some great cars, and the people loved them. We had to put together something pretty quick. If I'm not mistaken, the contracts weren't signed until maybe May or early June for the trip. So when it came to that time to get cars, a lot of them were already leased out for the year. So we kind of had to kick around to get cars. The Roanoke chapter provided us a coach. Great Scenic Train Journeys, the PBS show, they provided 5 cars for us. The Watauga group in Johnsonboro, Tennessee didn't give us. We leased the Crescent Harbor from them. The Buckingham provided a table car. And the 3 bi-levels we used were from the Atlantic Railway in North Carolina. And, they, while not your typical excursion cars, they actually provided a good vantage point for people because we only sold the bottom halves. So if you bought a ticket in one of those cars, you had full access to the upper views. And people really enjoyed that, and we put a new paint job on them and made it look like what the N&W would have had if they ever went into commuter service. So that was kind of putting our train together, and maybe hopefully if we do this again next year, we could do maybe another dome. We'd love to do a full length dome. Dome cars are always popular, especially in the fall foliage. So. We're just kind of, it was a busy season. So everyone's kind of just taking a break for a few weeks. And then if this is going to happen again, I'm sure everyone will go back to the drawing board on building a good consist and trying to get some feedback from what the passengers want and doing our best to fill those needs.
I'm going to say possibly the most controversial thing during this interview, Zach, to take the heat off of you. I really like those bi-level cars, and I would totally love to see one of those kind of transition baggage to high-level cars so that it really has the full streamlined look. I'm probably in the minority, but I there is something oddly charming about them.
Yeah, and those cars are historically accurate for steam. They were built for the Chicago Northwestern, and we have some photos of them being pulled by steam into Chicago. So we, like I said, a lot of people didn't like them. We did our best to make them kind of fit in the consist, and we put them in the middle of the consist, and For the most part, we got good compliments about them, so we'll take it.
The Strasburg Railroad is an institution in the heritage railroad industry, and its mechanical services department is proud to lead the way. With the knowledge and experience that has created one of the most reliable steam railroading experiences in the country, the Strasburg Railroad is excited to offer their expertise to the rest of the industry. Strasburg's professional team provides consulting and technical assistance to take your steam locomotive or rail car project from idea to finished product. They stand behind their work and always strive to meet their customers' needs for quality, historic accuracy, and reliability at a price that is fair. Unlike many competitors, they feature a fully equipped boiler, rail car, and machine shop, so the work gets done in-house, helping you get more for your money. Send your inquiries to mechanical@strasburgrailroad.com and let the professionals get to work for you. You put the train together and you go about the process of being able to get all these logistics in place. And I'm curious, before we get to the elephant in the room of the big major mechanical failure that happened, what were some of the minor challenges that came up during these trips, and how did you and your crews address them?
Probably honestly, the biggest challenge we ran into was getting enough volunteers to car host and be on ground support and everything. That was probably the biggest challenge, just because we were in Goshen and we were 30 to 40 minutes from Lexington, which was the closest place with a lot of restaurants and hotels. About 50 minutes from Stanton, same thing. That was the place with all the restaurants and hotels. So it was hard to get people there because, if they volunteered from Roanoke, they were having to drive an hour and 15 minutes in the morning, and our call time for volunteers is 7 a.m. So you got to get up at 5:30 or whatever to get there. And then once the trips were over at 6:30, then an hour and a half, 2 hours of cleaning, restocking the train, and then going home. So honestly, operationally, we've all done this before. We had to knock a little rust off because these were the first biggest trips, we've done since 2017. But once we got that down pretty quick, it was, and then after the first couple weekends, people were seeing what it was and the experience of it. And we actually picked up a lot of volunteers that were passengers the first couple weekends, which was, great, that we were like, oh, okay, we're doing something good if people were wanting to come back and volunteer their time to help us out. So once we got that down and we got the train staffed, it was, everything went pretty smooth.
How did you capitalize on that interest? So were the car hosts that you had essentially advertising saying, hey, if you want to come back and do this for free, then you can volunteer and help us out? What was the way of being able to get them on board in that regard?
Yeah. So, like I said, we were late in the game with the trips. I think it was August when the trips were actually announced. And then we had to sign on a lot of volunteers. And we did that through social media, through the constant contact emails for the museum and everything. And you would apply and then go through an onboarding process. But, our car hosts were phenomenal. And, when they're talking with passengers and we encourage our passengers to ask questions, about not only 611, but the operation. And when a lot of passengers found out that we were mostly an all volunteer train, they were like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Like, we'd love to help. So we would just send them the link to the application and they would fill it out, and, we'd bring them on, and, we continued to grow that way throughout the year, which made us feel good. It made, like I said, it makes us feel like we're doing something right if people are paying to ride with us and then they want to come back and volunteer their time to help us out and help spread the word of historic steam railroading. So, that makes us feel good that we're doing something right.
How did you see the local support for these excursions grow within Goshen, Craigsville, and these other line side communities?
Yeah, so the local support was out of this world. When we were first talking about this, we were talking to some of the locals and tell them, this is going to be a big deal, and I don't think um, they understood how big of a deal this was going to be. We told them we'd be bringing about 1,400 paying passengers per day to Goshen, but also the rail fans and the other people that come out to chase the train, and 611 has such a worldwide following. I've been around a lot of locomotives, and the only other ones I can see that has a following like this is, the Daylight, 765, and probably the 4014. Um, we had people coming from Australia, United Kingdom. We had a gentleman from Ethiopia that came to see it, um, Canada. But and bringing all those people worldwide into Goshen was really cool. And the little restaurant in town, like, we were there so much, the wait staff knew us by first names and knew what we would order. So the community really banded together, Craigsville as well, and took pride in the community as well, that all these people worldwide are coming to their area in the neck of the woods of Goshen, Craigsville, Stanton, to see this locomotive and see this beautiful scenery that these people get to live in every day. So the community support was unreal, and we were proud to bring that many people there, and also proud of just how the community embraced it, and had a lot of patience with a lot of the traffic and the people. But we couldn't ask for a better place to operate out of, and people to work with. It's the community of Goshen, Craigsville, Stanton, Lexington, all that. They were just top notch as well.
So you're underway, you've got the support, it builds as the weeks go on, things are going great. And then at the very end of October, the bad thing, what nobody wants to have happen, a major mechanical, well, yeah, somewhat major mechanical failure that that jeopardizes all of this that's built up. I am wondering if you can walk us through in how the issue was discovered and the process for being able to address that as quickly as you did.
Sure. So the Friday evening, I forget the date when it was. The crew was banking the engine up for the night, and we're hearing a noise from the firebox. Expertise on our crew quickly determined it was a broken flexible stay bolt. So um, we knew immediately, we weren't going to operate the next day for sure. Went ahead and we didn't think we were going to operate the rest of the weekend. So we were going to miss the Saturday and Sunday trips. So for obvious reasons, there's disappointment. We our guys were so disappointed, but we banded together, and our mechanical team is just top notch. I can't sing their praises enough. So they let the engine cool down. Saturday morning we had to call in. The diesels were there anyways from the return trip the night before, so we split them and put one on each end to do a push pull operation. So when things are going bad, they really go bad. So we didn't have the 611 pulling the trips on Saturday, but the first trip on Saturday as well, one of the diesels decided it was going to act up, and the traction motor went out on it before we could even leave the station. So we had to wait another hour for another diesel to come from Stanton to help us out. So I made it a point to go through each car on both trips and talk with the passengers, and just, you got to be transparent. And I would tell them, I'm like, look, not going to lie, it's been a bad day. We're just as disappointed, or not, or maybe even more disappointed, because the engine's not running. But things like this happen in railroading, and especially with historic railroading equipment, like the 611, 73 years old. Um, a broken stable was a very common thing during the days of steam. And if this would have been the 50s, they'd have pulled the engine off and grabbed another one off the ready track and put it on. We don't have that luxury, unfortunately. But so we started the first trip on Saturday, and came back, got the people off, serviced the train, went out on our second trip Saturday, and I got a phone call from Scott, and he's like, "Hey, engine's cooled down. We've got our guys in looking at it. If all goes well, we've got spare stay bolts on the tool car. If all goes well, we might be able to do this tomorrow and have this thing running." And it was kind of like oh wow, kind of a shot in the arm. And when we came back from the second trip, the smoke was coming from the engine. And to be honest, it was such a proud moment, that our team banded together. They overcame the adversity and, went in there, did what it took, got the stay bolt replaced, had the engine fired up, and we made the trips on Sunday. So I can't sing our praises enough for our mechanical team on the engine. But on top of that, it's just all this is such a team effort. And, and I tell everyone this, the engine does its thing. It attracts the people. But if you don't have a sold out train full of happy people to come back, then you don't have a train for the engine to pull and the engine to run, and vice versa. You can't do the train without the mechanical team maintaining and operating the 611 as well. So truly was a full team effort, and everyone pulled together, overcame the adversity, and we made the trips on Sunday and made a lot of happy people. And like I said, I just can't be more proud of our crew and all of our volunteers, locomotive crew, car host, everyone that was involved with this operation really pulled together and made it happen.
For those who might not be as versed on steam technology, what is a flexible stable and what is the significance of it? Why is it something that takes a locomotive out of service until it can be replaced?
So a flexible stay bolts are what hold the inner firebox sheets and the outer firebox sheets together. And on 611, you have flexible ones and you have rigids. So the flexible ones are kind of like a ball and socket with a cap on them, and they move as the engine gets hotter and gets colder. They flex. And this one that broke was just in a high stress area, and it was a failure of it. So our crew had to go in, get the bolt out, get the new one in, and do all the work for that. So, but yeah, that's the stay bolts, and I believe on 611, I can't give you the exact number, but I believe there's over 4,400 stay bolts on the 611. So 1 out of 4,400 is you never want any of them to break, but again, steam locomotives, maintenance, there's a reason railroads got rid of them. But a broken stay bolt is a pretty common occurrence on steam locomotives.
You talked about the tool car, and I want to give a little bit of light to the tool car because I think it is the unsung hero of mainline steam excursions in general. I had the pleasure of riding the 765's tool car back in 2015, and we covered that on the podcast here. And for these trips too, I appreciated your invitation for me to be able to ride in the tool car behind 611 on its last trip. And boy, what a package that is to see all of the hoses and welding equipment and the extra glad hands for the brake lines. I mean, that has to be such an important piece of everybody's looking at the steam engine, but the thing right behind the steam engine is equally as important because that's the thing that has so much of what you need to even just do the basic maintenance as well as when things go a little bit further south.
For sure. It's such an important part of the operation. we thanks to our expertise, leadership in our mechanical, Scott, he's been with the 611 since 81. We also have some other very veteran steam crew members. Tom Mayer's one. Tom's been around on the 2101, 614, 1522. Bob Saxton still comes out, helps us out a lot. Tim Spizzato, another veteran NS steam guy. But with all their expertise and training our newer crew, you always got to prepare for the worst the best you can. So, God has extra stay bolts on hand. We've got extra water glasses. Like you said, air hoses, other appliances and parts we may need out on the road, because basically, like you said, the tool car is our shop on the road. We can't go to AutoZone or Napa and get something most of the time. So we got to have our equipment with us. And, like you said, a tool car is such an important part of the operation. We take it everywhere with us. And it's also a pretty good place to ride, like you said. We always say the tool car is the next best place to be in than in the cab. So, because we get to open the doors and it's right behind the engine, and, you get the best show in the world there.
You really do. I've got a video in the show notes of this episode on the roundhousepodcast.com where you can see in a minute behind the scenes, and we've got some clips of my ride in the tool car, so you get to see some of the insides of what that looks like, which was pretty cool. Chris Eden Green asks, to the point of being able to train the future generations of rail preservationists, what is the plan to attract new recruits and retain them for the future of steam operations?
We're very lucky in a sense that Big Steam is operating again, because, when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, it was so normal, 611 running all the time, 765, a lot of big engines running all the time. And then we kind of went through a dry cycle of mainline steam. So people my age, kind of lost interest in it. Thankfully, Thomas the Tank Engine cartoon show was still big. So that piqued interest in a lot of kids. But now we're kind of in a renaissance of big steam again. There's a lot of engines being restored. So we're lucky in a sense that we're getting to see big steam again, and teaching the new generation of what steam is and what it did for our country. On our crew 611, like I spoke earlier, we have a lot of veterans in the steam industry, but we also have a young group coming on. And I'm almost 40 now, so I'm not one of the young guys anymore. But when I started in the steam industry on 765, I was in my 20s. So getting to learn from these veteran steam guys, Scott, Tom, Bob, they learned from the Joe Carrolls and the Pappy Housemans that worked nickel plate steam, Norfolk Western steam. Frank Collins is another one. They worked with those guys in the 70s, 80s, so they learned firsthand steam information. And these guys that we have now, Scott and Bob and them, when NS was running steam in the 80s and 90s, they were running 70 trips a year approximately. And that was also not including ferry moves. So those guys were the closest to the old days as possible, running steam all the time. So they're doing a great job of teaching our new guys of how to maintain the equipment, how to operate the equipment, to preserve it. And then, we try to engage in the community, and social media has been such a big thing for us. Has a lot of negativity, but the good parts of it is you can recruit people and they can see what you do, and we can go behind the scenes a little bit. So as we move forward, we're very active on social media. We encourage questions about steam. We most of our operation's a volunteer organization, so anytime we need new crew members or something, we'll put out an application on our Facebook and Instagram. and try to bring in and recruit new people to help preserve this great machine.
Continuing to look toward the future, big question on everybody's minds, and you've hinted that it is going to be the case, but I'll take Christopher Kovac's words, which are based on the success of these trips. Do you see Buckingham Branch becoming a permanent operating base for 611? Would trips to Clifton Forge be considered in the future as well?
I would never want to use the word permanent, because then that puts the engine in one specific place. To get the history of 611 and for people to see what 611 is, we want to run this thing anywhere we can. Kind of like 765 does, how the 4449 does, the 4014. The further you can go on rails, the more people you can reach and spread this thing. So I don't want to use the word permanent, but we do feel that Goshen could be a good place to operate throughout the year if that's what's available. As far as going to Clifton Forge and other areas, we haven't looked into that yet, because this was an everyday thing building up to the excursions. We knew we had to get on the Buckingham at Waynesboro, and we knew we had to get to Goshen. So that was our main focus at that point, was getting all the clearances, the weight issues, everything just for that section of track between Waynesboro and Goshen. That was our main focus. Would we love to go to other places? 100%, but we just don't know at this time if the engine can fit there. And everyone says, C&O had 484s that operated over the whole district. Well, while that is correct, those 484s weren't as big as 611 either, and have the same clearance issues as we might have. So, if this thing expands in the future, I'm sure our team will look into going to other places. But it all goes down to the planning and logistics and where the engine can operate with clearances and things like that.
Mike Hune asks, what have you learned from this year's trips, and what will happen to improve upon them, i.e. expanded or newer offerings like a dog train, a pizza train, etc.? Basically, in my words, what were the points at which you, Zac, said, note to self, we're doing this differently next year, or we're doing this again next year?
Yeah. So, like I said, we were pretty much a start from scratch operation. Again, I use this analogy a lot. You got to crawl before you walk. Our main goal this year was to show that we could operate safely and successfully, and we felt we did that. We had no reportable injuries out of 20,000 people. We ran 30, counting the test run and the VIP train, we ran 32 trips total. 611 missed 2 of them. But that was our main goal, was to get through this year, spell it out, have great customer feedback and experiences, and then if we can make this an annual thing, build on it, and different experiences, different operations per se, and then just kind of open that box of, okay, let's try this next year, or let's not go this route or leave at this time, because we might have to meet Amtrak or something. But next year, if we can, if we want to do this, if the railroad wants to do this, then we can start looking into maybe some theme trains or operating other times of the year, not just the fall. So we're like I said, everyone's kind of picking their feet up and taking a break going into the holiday season. And then we'll all get together and see what worked, what didn't, and if it's something we want to do again next year.
Southern Railman asks, are plans for PTC installation in the works?
The PTC, we've talked about it, obviously. We know we got to have it if we're ever going to operate on Norfolk Southern or other Class 1 railroads. Me and Scott, and I believe Tom it was, a few years ago, went to a PTC symposium that Fort Wayne Railroad held. in Fort Wayne, and we learned a lot. The thing with PTC with us is what we're thinking about is right now we don't need it. On the Buckingham, we don't need it to be in the lead. They're not a PTC railroad. If the opportunity came to run on Norfolk Southern or another class one where PTC would be needed, obviously, yeah, we're going to go down that road of looking into it, what it would take to work. One of our questions we have about PTC is, as of right now that I know of, the only engines that had PTC were oil burners. So putting PTC on a coal burner, we don't know how well the computer is going to hold with the cinders and the ash and the dirty environment of a coal burner. And then the software, my understanding, is always needing updated. So that's a lot of money as well. At this very moment, we're not actively pursuing PTC on the locomotive because we don't need it right now. But if opportunities arise in the future where we would need it, we would definitely go down that road. And we have a team in place that could help make that possible and get it on the locomotive. And then, of course, it's going to take funding a lot too. So we would probably have to do a huge fundraising campaign for PTC on the locomotive as well.
Jimmy Moore asks, what can the public do to help keep the excursions going forward?
Well, since the trips are over for this year, email the museum, email the Virginia Scenic Railway, the Buckingham. Show your support for it. Let spread the word on social media with the pictures and videos. We can't operate without sold out trains. And if we do this in the future, or whatever trips or experiences we offer in the future, buy tickets for it. We got to have support that way. The engine burns coal and water, but it also burns a lot of money as well. It costs a lot to operate. Costs a lot to operate, and with car leases and food, staffing, hotels for our crew, things like that. It all costs. So the biggest support is donations, buying tickets, and then public support of it, whether it's emailing the museum, the railroads, posting on our Facebook and Instagram pages, your experiences, pictures, just spreading the word that way. Positive, interaction, things like that is what really helps support this and keep it moving forward.
Kind of handshaking with that, Byron Fadley asks, how can I get involved in the future?
So, yeah, next time we need volunteers, we'll post it on our official 611 Facebook page and Instagram pages. The museum will post a link to it as well, and then just apply through our application process, and we'll go through that process of getting them on board. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot of people, and being honest, everybody wants to work on the engine, but the car host in the bi-level is just as important as the fireman on the engine, and the person checking in the tickets at the tent is just as important as the engineer. So I'll quote Scott on a saying he gave us one of our very first crew meetings back in 2014. Was there's a lot of people that work at NASA, but only the people that go to space get all the glory on the shuttle. But it takes everyone to make this work. It's all one big puzzle, and everyone's a piece, and we just fit it all together to make the big picture. So, just keep an eye on our pages, and when we need people, we'll put out a call for it.
My last question for you, Zach, is I'm sure there were a number of moments in which you were able to kind of look and see the success around what was going on. But if you could share with us a specific moment or a specific time at which you were able to have an experience with someone, fellow crew, public, or even solo, where you were just able to go, man, we we really did it. I'm wondering if there's like a specific moment you can highlight where it's like, that this had meaning behind it.
Oh my gosh. To be honest, there's so many great experiences out of this. Everything from, people traveling the world to see it. I fired one of the trips, and firing the 611 over C&O territory, which my grandfather was a C&O railroader, was pretty cool. But oh gosh, it's hard to pinpoint one specific. I did meet a young man from Stanton. Alexander was his name, and him and his mother rode one of our first trips. And between trips, he came up to the engine, and I could see him. He was focused on the the auxiliary tender. And so I walked up to him and I said, "Hey man, got any questions or anything?" He said, "Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how this water tender works." And so I told him, I said, basically it's connected with a hose to the main tender, and the water equalizes itself. And he's like, "Oh, okay, I get it. Like, I understand how it works." And he showed me and everything. And he loved the engine. He lived in Stanton. And, I gave him one of our old Fable cabs that we replaced in Stroudsburg last year. And he loved it. And I told him, I said, if you want to come down during the week when we fire the engine up, you can. And, him and his mom left. And a few days later on fire up day, we're there getting the train ready. And this car pulls up, and it's Alexander and his mom and his dad and his brother. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you all came. So cool." And he drew me a picture of 611. And I've got it in my office downstairs. And he was just so excited for the 611. And his mom and dad told me that ever since the day they rode the trip, on his calendar in his room, he was marking off days of when he could come down to fire up day. So that was just personally, really cool to me that a young kid, smart kid like him was so interested in this. And, maybe that's what'll help carry this torch of steam railroading in the future. Who knows? He might be one of our firemen or engineers one day. But if I could, help a young kid like that stay interested in it and, move forward and, tell them that, steam engines are cool. It's not all about sports in school and, being in the cool kids club or whatever. Steam engines are pretty freaking cool, what they can do. And so that just meant a lot to me. And especially him drawing a picture for me and everything meant a lot. And so hopefully, we touched and many other future generations like that. And, like I said, the young kids like that, they're the ones that's going to be carrying the torch when we're all old and in the nursing home and can't do it anymore.
Zac, thank you so much for joining us here on the Roundhouse and talking about briefing and debriefing us on this series of excursions. Obviously, we wait with bated breath to see what 2024 holds, but it's been tremendous to see what you and your team accomplished in 2023.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for all your support and coverage and helping us reach a bigger audience. And hopefully we can do this again next year and come out and ride with us again.
I look forward to it.
And now, the question of the day.
Last time on the Roundhouse, we were talking to Lucy Dormont and Gordy Robinson of the National Model Railroad Association. I asked you guys, what gives you hope in the future of model railroading? And I received a lot of interesting responses. Here's a few I selected to share with you. From Craig Durham, plenty of new cottage industries are poking up. It's no longer just blue and red boxes on the shelf in the UK, and some genuine competition variety has entered the market. The levels of customer service from the likes of Rapido are second to none. John Tedesco Jr. writes, model railroading has had its ups and downs since the very beginning when Lionel Cowan made the first electric gondola. The hobby has been through years of development, persevering through wars, stock market crashes, depressions, popularity changes and trends, and even a worldwide pandemic. As long as the trains continue to amuse people, young and old, the hobby will continue to evolve and find a way. Alexander Goldman writes, I think 3D printing and laser cutting have done a great job at giving modelers the opportunity to create super detailed and prototypical models easily. This has also led to individuals and smaller/newer companies to offer the general public superbly done models which fit with more niche railroads, which the larger, well-established companies don't see the possibility in offering models of. And lastly, from my mother-in-law, Nancy DeReamer, being able to connect online with other people who love trains as much as you do. Your question of the day for this episode is, what are your favorite holiday railroad memories? Let me know on the roundhousepodcast.com. Links to social media are there. As always, guys, thank you for listening to The Roundhouse. It's great to have you along for the journey. Do check out the show notes for that short video where I take you inside the tool car. And remember that the Roundhouse is our house.